Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another comic review, and this time I am reviewing Batman by Tinian, Batman by Tamaki, and the Superman Annual by Philip Kennedy Johnson. So it must be time to move directly into the first comic that will be reviewed. So, starting off with the Tinian Batman issue. So, first things first, does this cover in any way, shape, or form connect to anything that happens directly in connection to the story? Surprisingly, it does. And I really like what the artist has done here with their rendering, and it really suits to what happens what happens inside, art-wise as well as story-wise. For the art, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Or for the cover, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Let's move into the art, which I'll show some art around the beginning, middle, and the end, before I move into the area of the story. Now, just to take note, I am only going to be reviewing the first story in this and not the backstory. And the same will also be happening with the additional comics. But the annual only has one story, so with that, it's pretty simple. So this is some of the art around the beginning. As you can see, Scarecrow letting us know that Fear State will be starting soon. And it will be going, of course, for that whole month. You know, like another one of those crazy, stupid events at DC Comics. Don't you think the readers need a break from that right now? And of course, we've got Batman up against Peacekeeper 01. I'll now move to smart towards the middle. I will say one thing. This story did have quite a bit of action in it. But it also seems to carry over with the Detective Comics issue as well. But I'll get to that once I get to finishing the review for this volume and the rating of this volume, of this issue. And last but not least, let's move towards the end. And this is some of the art towards the end of the story. For the art, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Now the fun part. Let's move on to the story rating. How well does it go story-wise? As you all know who follow this channel, I have 4 particular things that sort of stand out for me in stories. Number 1, did this story remember to bring over any important comic references that might be important for the reader to know in relation to the story? No. Points sort of lost there. What about time? Do we know what time of day that this is sort of taking place at? Or even, should I say, time of night? No, but it would not hurt to include it in the story. What about the location? Well, actually, one thing I sort of liked in this was something that was brought into the story. And yeah, I know the rating, I'll tell you one thing, the rating isn't going to be super high. But at least it's not super low. But there was something that came up in the story that I did actually like. Of course, we know that this was being held in Gotham. But we also had a magistrate sky base. 01 that made an appearance in this. And you also got to know how far above it was Gotham, and that I actually enjoyed. It was nice to see that in there because it actually lets you know the lengths of how far Simon Saint is willing to, well, try to get rid of Batman. And of course, Simon Saint does make an appearance in this. So, for that, it was okay, but was it enough to, say, maybe deliver the story over a certain number? Let's move into the cast. So, in the cast, we had Batman, Peacekeeper 01, Miracle Molly, Meccano, Oracle, Nightwing. We had Ghost Hunter, Harley Quinn, and last but not least, Simon Saint. And it was really interesting seeing the interaction between these characters. And oh, hold on. I think I also forgot. Oh, no. She's in the next issue that I'll be reviewing. That's Huntress. She doesn't make an appearance in it, but she does make an appearance in the next issue. For this, overall, I gave the story a 6.5 out of 10. As there were parts of the story which felt they needed, sort of like, to know the time. It was good to see some of the places, but it would have been nice to see sort of like more locations pointed out, as it does make the reader feel a little bit disillusioned. So, time to move into the next issue for reviewing. So, jumping into Detective Comics, issue 1039, written by Mariko Tamaki, and art by, of course, the additionals, Bogdanovic, Henriks, Mallet, and T-Rex. Jumping directly into the cover rating, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening within inside the story? Surprisingly, it does, and to which I gave the cover rating a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move into the art, which I'll show at the beginning, middle and the end. As I stated before, I will not be covering the backstory. And here we go with some of the art around the beginning. Some art around the middle. And last but not least, some art around the end. For this, I thought the art was okay, and I gave the art pretty much the rating the same as the cover, which is a 7 out of 10. But the thing is, how does it hold off in regards to the story? As I brought up before, there are certain things that I enjoy in my stories. So my top 4 things that I like to enjoy seeing in my stories are, of course, first things first, being comic references. Were there any important comic references that needed to be brought up within the story, which also might have helped the story, and even helped the reader of what's happening within this particular story arc? Surprisingly, no, there weren't, and it is disappointing. It wouldn't have hurt to have had, say, a reference to the last issue, just to get an understanding as to when this character of Vile actually started to come in. Moving into the next area, does it cover anything in relation of time? Well, the closest we get in relation to time is a timer from a countdown from a bomb. It wasn't really the best thing. I could understand what was happening in the scene, and you do get to see that within the art, but I really felt it sort of killed the story. In other words, the story is a self-imploding ticking time bomb. As it also wouldn't have hurt to let the reader know what time of the night that Batman was actually taking on these particular villains, along with the other members of the Bat family. Like, I wouldn't care if you say did it at 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe even 12 p.m. at night. It would be nice to see that brought up in a story, instead of people just having to guess willy-nilly and being incorrect every time. What about location? Do we get any area in relation to location? No. No, we don't. Again, this is something that really led to the deprivation of this store, of the score. What about cast of characters? Well, of course, we do actually get to see the villain at the front of the cover. And we also get a bit of a backstory, to which I think the backstory was way better than the front story. At least then you got a bit of an understanding of where the villain was coming from. And if I were to give a rating on the backstory compared to the front story, I think I'd give the backstory probably a 7.5 out of 10. And that includes with the art as well. But I'm not rating that story. I'm rating this story. So, moving into the cast of characters, we had Vile, we had Huntress. It looks like there was also the appearance of Cassandra Cain, Batgirl. Of course, we had Dick Grayson. We had Oracle. We also had Mr. Worth return in this issue, and a character by the name of Donovan, who also, I believe, appeared in the last issue. But for the overall story rating, this got a terrible 4 out of 10. This is Bendis levels trash. I did not enjoy this issue. If anything, it does need to be thrown into fool's gold. Well, let's move on to something that might be a little bit more hopeful. Let's move into the Superman annual. Wow, here we are, finally up to the last comic to review on this video. And that is on the review of the Action Comics Superman Annual 2021. And my goodness, this could actually work as a good standalone story as to how this is being done by Philip Kennedy Johnson. And it almost feels like it could sort of work in a Superman Beyond type of story. And I do actually like the idea of it. But first things first, I need to get to the cover rating. I can't jump right into the story rating. I gotta get into the cover rating. So does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to anything that happens within inside this actual comic? Surprisingly, it does, and I really liked the way they did this cover. I like how they sort of like bring out each of the members of the House of Al. I don't care about their colours, but you know what? They do feel like interesting characters. And to which I gave the cover a rating of 8 out of 10. Oh my goodness. So I better move into the internal art, showing the beginning, middle, and the end. Now this is a little bit of art just on the first page. I'll jump over to the next page. I must admit, it was really nice reading this story, even though it does take place on War World. And the character that is here, he almost reminds me of a sort of like a Booster Gold character that's from the future, but he's on a different planet. But he's also got his own little stories to tell, to share on this planet, to help give some of the citizens hope. I'll cover that later in the review, but I did enjoy how the artist covered him. Alright, now to some art around the middle. Some art around the middle. Now to move towards the end. And last but not least, art towards the end. I must admit, I really enjoyed the art in this story. And I think it also worked for the story too, as with the character that they were using to tell the story. To which I gave the art 7.5 out of 10. Now, as you know, my previous reviews didn't have art that high. Now, moving into the story. Now, these first couple of things I'm not really worried about. Because the story was so good and enjoyable. References, none applicable. Time, none applicable. But you know what? We did get locations. And in regards to locations, we got, of course, War World, of where this story was being spoken about and taking place. We also got to see the Phantom Zone and something that was actually happening within the Phantom Zone connected to one of the members of the House of El. And of course, last but not least, Sanctuary, which is also once again connected to the House of El. The cast members being made of Mr. Biala, Falcus, Allura, I think that's Doran, and of course Brandon Al. So we got to see some members connected to the House of Al, as well as some of the members who are connected to who this story is being told about. And I really liked how this story came across. As the main character, Mr. Byler, was telling the story, you could also see that one of the characters to whom the story was being told to really felt that these stories were actually real, that he was telling about. In other words, the kid was taking it like, this is the literal truth, this is really happening, or this has really happened. And yeah, kids do that. Along with that, you also saw some of the other members sort of like disagreeing with something to which one of the other members did, and sort of like feel if you did if you did this, you might get in big trouble with the big bad on this planet. And that sense was sort of like, okay, what can I do to calm down the situation? Mr. Byler moves in, the story gets told, and as we start to see this story around the House of Al, you start to see some of the things that are happening there. And of course, it links to one of the members of the House of Al having an encounter with a cyborg Superman. And I won't give away any more, but I really like this story. But these events also take place around sort of like a wedding that's about to happen and occur, but it does end up returning to the wedding, and also some of the things that happen within the Phantom Zone. It is almost as if when the members of the House of L entered the Phantom Zone, it felt like that they were encountering some phantoms of the past. So, including like some phantoms connected to their own past. And I found that part of the story quite enjoyable. To which it's now time for the story rating. Surprisingly enough, this story rating was higher than the last two story ratings, to which I gave the story rating a 7.5 out of 10. Thank you, Philip Kennedy Johnson. I really enjoyed this story. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.